Welcome to Shiloh Reviews. On this episode, we're going to talk about Canada's Hawaii. So where is Canada's Hawaii? Well, only in two places in Canada can you go surfing. One is on the very far east coast in Nova Scotia, and the other one is on the very far west coast in a place called Tofino. Since I live on the west coast, and because of all the COVID orders and the restrictions on travel, I decided to visit Canada's Hawaii on the west coast called Tofino. Tofino is a world-class destination that's visited by many people all across the world. And the reason why it's so famous is because you can surf there. Tofino gets massive waves just touching the Pacific Ocean and really is a surfer's paradise. So is there really anything to do there if you aren't a surfer? Absolutely. As a not very outdoorsy person, I had a great vacation there, and I think you can too. In this video, I'll share the places that we visited, what we did, and help you plan your itinerary for visiting Tofino in the future. First things first, how do you get there? Tofino is located about 6 hours from Vancouver, and you have to take a ferry to get there. And that's probably the most challenging part of the whole excursion to getting to Tofino. There are two ferry terminals in Vancouver. One is in Horseshoe Bay and one is in Tsawwassen. If you can, taking the ferry from Horseshoe Bay is the ideal route. The reason being, your ferry trip will be much more comfortable because the ferry is quite large, and the ferry trip is actually much shorter. After that, you'll dock in a place called Nanaimo, and you'll start your journey in through Vancouver Island to the very end to get to Tofino. Nanaimo is a larger city, so if you do have anything to pick up, it's most ideal to pick it up from Nanaimo. After that, the next city is a few hours away and is called Port Alberni. That's the second best place to pick up anything you need, because once you get past Port Alberni, there aren't any large stores, any sorts of chain restaurants, or anything like that. It's all small shops, mostly family-run businesses, and co-ops to purchase items that you would normally get at a grocery store. The drive to Tofino is absolutely beautiful. You pass many provincial parks. There are tons of creeks and rivers where you can just take a stop and relax by the water. So if you pack any food with you, it's much easier to just hop out of the car, take a quick look there, have a bite, and then continue on your journey. Once in Tofino, you have many options for accommodation. You can camp all the way to fancy hotels that are really 5-star luxury. There's everything in between. The one thing that all these places have in common is that they are fairly expensive. Because Tofino is a resort town, the prices are quite high to really stay pretty much anywhere. You can stay in another town called Ucluelet, which is just about 30 minutes away from Tofino, where it's slightly larger and they have quite a few more amenities than they actually have in Tofino. And on my trip there, that's what I did. I stayed in Ucluelet, and it was absolutely beautiful, and I'm really happy that we stayed there because Tofino is an extremely small town. It just doesn't have the infrastructure to host a lot of tourists. I stayed at the Water's Edge Shoreside Suites and highly recommend staying there. It was absolutely beautiful. It's right on the water, and you could see all the boats coming in and out of the harbor. We could hear seals in the morning and birds, and it was just so peaceful and relaxing. This was, I would say, more mid-range accommodation. There are much cheaper places to stay, as well as much more expensive places as well. I'll show you what our accommodation looked like. up bright and early to check out the township of Tofino. We didn't really have any expectations because both of us had never been there before. It's really only a few blocks. There's a little bit of a park, and then there's a marina, and there's just a couple blocks of shops to visit. Walked through the entire township of Tofino in about 30 minutes, and then we headed over to the beach. Is really where all the action is, and it's so massive. It stretches for kilometers all along the coast, and it's just amazing. The sand is so soft, and it just kind of blows into everything because it's so fine, and the water is really cold. The water is really cold, but it's so crystal clear and just stunning. One thing to note is that the beaches aren't actually in the city of Tofino. They're slightly outside the city along the highway. I was thinking that we would get to the little township of Tofino and then be able to walk along the beach there, but it's not quite set up that way. Tofino, the city center piece, is really a marina, and the beaches are all along the coast by the highway. The Hawaiian island that it's closest to is the Big Island. So if you've been to the Big Island, Tofino will really remind you of that. The food in Ucluelet was absolutely delicious. It was some of the best food that we've ever had. The one food item that we loved so much were the oysters. The oysters in Tofino and Ucluelet were so massive, so juicy, and just cooked so well to perfection. They were really delicious, and I highly recommend picking them up or having a bite at a restaurant somewhere if you are a fan of oysters. On our first night, we stopped by the Raven Lady oyster food truck in Ucluelet, and while we were there, we picked up the buttermilk fried oysters as well as the cod burger, and both of those were so delicious. The cod patty was like over an inch thick, and it was just so delicious, cooked to perfection. We did eat at two restaurants in Tofino. One was the Rhino Cafe, where we picked up something called a bronut, and it was essentially a breakfast sandwich in a donut, which was super cool. And for lunch, we ate at a restaurant there called The Wolf in the Fog, and that was a really cool experience as well. We had oysters again there, which were absolutely delicious, as well as one of their special items of the next day, we were up bright and early at 5:30 a.m. to go on a bear watching tour. This was something that both of us had never been on before, and it just really piqued our interest that we'd be going on a little boat to these remote islands to go find bears. It just sounded so cool, and it was. tour, we saw a bear in its natural habitat. It was just walking along the rocks of a beach in a deserted island, flipping them over looking for crabs. It was really awesome to see. We also saw a bunch of seals and jellyfish along the way. That day, we also checked out the Wild Pacific Trail, where there's a beautiful lighthouse, as well as a bunch of small, very easy trails to go for a walk through right along the water. That evening, we had one of the best dining experiences of our entire lives. We went to a restaurant called Pluvio, which is in Ucluelet, and I cannot recommend this restaurant enough. It was just absolutely amazing. It's a very small restaurant. We were seated right by the kitchen where we could see them making all of the food. It was just so fun and such a cool thing. The restaurant is quite popular, so you absolutely need reservations. They don't take any walk-ins, and it's a set 3 or 5 course menu. Up bright and early and making the drive back to Nanaimo to head home. The trip felt really short while we were there. It actually would have been nice to maybe have had a couple more days, to go for 4 full days, or even 5 days would have been nice, just to relax a little bit more and enjoy the scenery. Because Tofino is such a beautiful place, as well as Ucluelet, there's just so much nature, and it's so nice to get away from the city and be in that type of environment. It would have been nice to be gone for just a few more days. The beauty of Tofino and Ucluelet is a feast for the eyes, and the food there is definitely a feast for the belly. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks so much for watching. I hope there were a few helpful tips and nuggets in there for your future trip to Tofino or Ucluelet. And if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. I would really appreciate it. And I'd love to connect with you. Shoot me a note at Shyla Reviews on Instagram. Thanks so much for watching. Bye for now.